the previous US administration repeatedly pushed back here at the UN against long-agreed international language on sexual reproductive health and rights. What impact has this had on the international landscape for women and reproductive health and rights, and what can the Biden administration do here about that? What are you planning to do in the days and weeks going forward?
Thank you for that question. You know, when we came back in January of 2020, we restored U.S. standing on this issue. We brought back U.S. policy to align with our allies, with the United Nations, and with global norms, and to ensure that we were supporting efforts on women's health and reproductive rights globally. We restored our funding to the UNFPA. We have supported across the board issues related to women. President Biden put out a strong statement, I think it was today, in terms of the U.S. plan for how we will deal with these issues moving forward. And he was very clear that we will move forward, not backward, as it relates to women's reproductive rights. So we will continue to press these issues moving forward and ensure that our positions as the U.S. government support the global positions on these issues.
Just a really quick follow-up. Have you noticed any lingering hangover here at the UN from the stance of the previous US administration?
No, what I've noticed is that people were happy we came back, and that we realigned ourselves, and that we resumed funding UNFPA. That was a major commitment that the president made early on, and he honored that commitment immediately.
Okay, Ibtisam.
Thank you, Olivia. Thank you, Ambassador, for the briefing. My name is Ibtisam Azim from Al Arabi Al Jadid newspaper. I have a question on the issue of human rights that the Biden administration put high on its priority. And my question is about specifically Middle East countries, your allies in the Middle East. And I want to ask specifically about Egypt and human rights violations there. I asked you in last September before the GA about the case of Ala Abdel Fattah. And as you know, that the administration gave more than $1 billion in military aid to Egypt. You hold back about $130 million lately, but you still sell weapons for billions of dollars to the Egyptian government. And the question is two parts. The first part about Ala Abdel Fattah again. He, as you probably know, activist who was a leading figure in 2011 Arab Spring uprising. A month ago, he started a hunger strike, protesting his situation and treatment. It's said that he has been tortured and is in a maximum security prison in Egypt. My question is whether you are following his case, and any message to his family, and what your administration is doing to hold the Egyptian government accountable on their human rights violations. Thank you.
Well, let me start by saying that the administration has been very strong on bringing back human rights as a core part of our foreign policy and a core priority for us in our relationships with every country we work with. We are following his situation in Egypt, and I can tell you that we do engage with the Egyptian government on issues of human rights. We engage with them on this issue whenever we meet with them, and at every level that we meet with the Egyptian government. So you can be assured that it is always on our agenda when we have discussions with the government.
Just quickly, but which practical step are you taking to follow up on that? Because it seems to be, despite your the way you talk about it and the critics you are doing, it doesn't have an effect on the ground. There are still thousands of Egyptians who are in prison for political reasons, including Ala. He's one of many others.
Yeah, and again, what I can say is you can be assured that this is something that is a high priority for the U.S. government when we engage with the Egyptian government, and again, at every single level. And this is a huge change from previously where we didn't raise human rights issues. We didn't see it as a major priority, and it's something that is a major priority, and it is, we're not always successful immediately in our engagements, and that's in many different places in the world. But every country knows that if there are issues of human rights, that they can expect that this will be at the top of our priority list when we're engaging with those countries and when we're having discussions with them about where we go next in our bilateral relationship.
Let's go to the back. Philippe, I saw your hand.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Philippe Rater, AFP. Do you plan, in May, do you plan any vote on your draft resolution on North Korea?
Thank you, Philippe. And we do have a resolution that is being discussed in the council on DPRK. And it is our plan to move forward with that resolution during this month. We're very concerned about the situation there, the numerous violations of Security Council resolutions that the DPRK has engaged in, and it is our hope that we can keep the Council unified in condemning those actions by the DPRK.
Benno?
Thank you, Ambassador. Benno Schwinghammer with the German press agency DPA. Just a quick follow-up to Michelle's question and about the Supreme Court who's poised to overturn Roe v. Wade. Do you see this as something that could weaken your stance as a U.S. representative to push for health rights for girls and women abroad, for example, in Afghanistan?
Well, the Supreme Court hasn't spoken yet. And while we've seen this document that has been leaked, and it raises a number of concerns for all of us in our international policies in terms of support for women and girls' reproductive health, we will continue to support those efforts.
Down in front.
Thank you, Madam President. My name is Abdul Hamid Sayam from the Arabic daily Al-Quds Al-Arabi that is based in London. Madam President, I don't think there is good occupation and bad occupation.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
There is no good occupation and bad occupation. So when the people of Ukraine resist their occupiers, they are heroes. When Russia bombed these buildings and those hospitals and train stations, these are war crimes. Taking the view away from Ukraine to Palestinian occupied territories. Same thing is done to the Palestinians, but when they resist their occupiers, they are called terrorists. And when these buildings are destroyed in Gaza, that's self-defense. So there is double standard that the world can see. What can be done to unify the speech of the United States and its policies to stand against occupation, against confiscation of land, against 6,000 Palestinians in jail, against putting children in jail and putting on a military trial, and speaking not only stating that you support the two-state solution, but putting some pressure because you give Israel $4 billion a year so that it can redress some of these atrocities committed against the Palestinian people for over 55 years. Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you for that question. And we have been clear throughout that we believe the Palestinians and Israelis equally deserve equal measures of freedom, security, prosperity, and dignity. And we've made our views clear both in private and in public that neither side should take any unilateral steps that exacerbate tensions and undercut efforts to advance a negotiated two-state solution. But we know the two sides are far apart, and the ground, unfortunately, is not ripe for moving or restarting negotiations that will lead to that two-state solution. As you know, I traveled to the region in November. I spent significant time meeting with the Israelis, but I also spent a significant amount of time meeting with the Palestinians and discussing with them the way forward. And we're still working on that. And I don't see that we have a policy that is in any way different from what we're doing elsewhere in the world. But we've made clear our strong stance in support of Israel's security as they are being attacked by, and it is out of Hamas, and I don't think there's any disagreement among many that they have made terrorist attacks, and we have to be strong in our support and in our efforts to defend the rights of the Israelis to defend themselves against rocket attacks from Hamas and other terrorist groups, but we also are clear that Palestinians deserve peace and prosperity.
Celia, go ahead. You had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. I'm Celia Davaren, and I work for Africa. Let me go back to Ukraine. You must have seen or felt that a lot of Africans were not going to be in your favor, I mean, not your favor, but in favor of the resolution for Ukraine, because they were saying that, what about them? They are going to suffer the most, and we can see that it's true. So what do you say to some of them who said that some country put pressure on them to vote in favor of your resolution?
One country put pressure on them in writing to vote against the resolution. The U.S. never put pressure. We appealed to countries because what we are dealing with here is an attack on the sovereignty of a nation. We're dealing with an attack on the core values of the UN Charter and the integrity of Ukraine's border. So the pressure that countries felt, that pressure was not to support doing the right thing, and that is supporting Ukraine. I personally had a number of very intense and personal discussions with my African colleagues to say to them, this is not a war between the United States and Russia, and to make clear that yes, this is going to have an impact on Africa, and it's because of that impact on Africa that it is important that African countries stay on the right side of condemning Russia for the actions that they have taken in Ukraine. The vote was divided on the African continent, but a number of countries did support the resolution.
Maggie?
Margaret Bashir with Voice of America. Ambassador, you said Syria is going to be a priority for you this month, and you're going to the region. I'm wondering what the U.S. position is on the warming of relations a bit from Arab countries, some Arab countries, towards Syria at the present time, including from the UAE, which is on the council with you. There's sort of bringing Assad back into the fold a little bit. Is that helpful? Is that anything that will get you to a lasting solution on resolving the war, or even help you with the cross-border aid resolution that's coming up?
You know, we think the Assad regime has not earned the right for a softening of relationships They are still holding their people hostage, and they continue to commit human rights violations against their people. And that's why we think it is absolutely important that we do everything in our power to keep the cross-border humanitarian assistance flowing into Syria. We have worked, as you know, last year and came to an agreement with the Russians that enabled that crucial humanitarian assistance to continue to flow. Russia requested that the Secretary General issue a report on cross-line aid this past December, and the United States supported that. We supported the provision of aid through all modalities, including cross-border as well as cross-line. And we were happy that the Secretary General's report reflected both processes. But it's clear to us that cross-line aid is not enough. We cannot provide the assistance that the Syrian people need just through cross-line. And that is one of the reasons that I will be working over the course of my presidency and up through July to get the mandate expanded and hopefully continued. So this will be work that all of us will be working on in the Security Council, all 15 members. I think we have agreement that humanitarian assistance in Syria is still needed. And even for those countries who might be thinking about a softening of their approach to Syria, I think they will also understand that the continuation of humanitarian assistance cross-line as well as cross-border will be essential to maintaining support for the Syrian people.
We have time for one more, and we'll go to Joe.
Thank you. Joseph Klein, Canada Free Press. First of all, can you give us any update on the JCPOA negotiations and whether the subject has come up in your discussion with your colleagues in the Security Council? And with respect to the briefing on the 23rd on technology and security, you mentioned disinformation. I'm wondering whether you see any relationship in the discussion in the Security Council with the recently announced Disinformation Governance Board, looking for best practices. You mentioned best practices being discussed at this meeting on the 23rd, and whether you see, I guess, in your national capacity, any role for government regulation of social media platforms that are not doing the job of controlling what might be regarded as hate speech or disinformation. Thank you.
On the JCPOA, I can say that we have made some substantial progress in resolving a significant number of the issues that we think would be necessary for us to come back into the deal on a compliance basis. But there's still a lot more work to be done, and we don't have an agreement just yet. And it's possible we might not get there. Of course, if diplomacy does not succeed, then we'll continue to work very closely with others in the international community to increase the pressure on Iran. The president made a solemn commitment that Iran must not be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon, but he also made a commitment that he was prepared to go back into the JCPOA. So we're continuing to work on that effort, and we'll see where it leads. In terms of our event on the 23rd, we will look at this issue broadly as it relates to disinformation. And I mean, there's no doubt that it's related to what the United Nations is doing, because the UN, the setting up of this governing board and even the Secretary General's plan to appoint a technology ASG, these are all part of the same initiative, and we hope to work with them because our goal is that in cyberspace, we come up with an agreed upon set of values and regulations that will provide the opportunity for digital technology to be used for good and not be used for bad. As it relates to government regulations, that's a two-edged sword because some governments regulate for good and other governments regulate so that they can control what their people do, what their people say, how they move. So we want a set of governing regulations that will not allow governments to abuse the human rights of their people, but allow digital technology to be used to support people's needs broadly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you. This is all we have time for today, but we look forward to engaging with you throughout the month of May and doing this again soon.
Thank